I read the book and was just amazed and flabbergasted, and no, not flabbergasted, I guess just totally impressed, and I didn't really know her backstory. And so her book, From the Ground Up, kind of tells that story about how she came to be involved in this growing movement. And it's just a wonderful book. It's a wonderful read, even if you have no interest in urban gardening. It's just a very heartfelt story. So there are copies actually for sale outside in the foyer, and Jeanne would be happy to sign them after her talk. But with that, I think I'll just ask Jeanne to come up and welcome her to DePaul.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a great introduction. I mean, I didn't even know that was part of how we met. So that was great. Like the locker room, the men's locker room part. Well, thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, and for Hugh for inviting me here. And I was here once before when Hugh's class read my book, and it was so fun for me to talk with everybody. So my plan tonight is that I'll speak for about a half an hour, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So anything that you want to talk about that I don't go into now, we can definitely cover that ground. We just had dinner with some of the faculty here, and I'm really impressed by so much of what's happening here. I feel like I've only heard a little scratch of the surface of the efforts towards sustainability, towards educating students about environmental literacy, and all good things around food that are happening. So it's really neat to be here. And I want to hear more about what's happening and read some of the studies and research in relation to community gardens and harvest amounts and things like that that are happening here. But I'm going to jump in now, and I'll start with the more personal aspect of my book. The book is 3 parts. It's memoir, how to grow food. So I wanted to convey to people that growing food is easy and doable. The appendix of the book is 10 lists of 10 that try to break down how you grow food in a very accessible, doable way. It's not rocket science for each one of us. If you go back not too long in our genealogy, you'll find a relative who grew food. So that knowledge can be fairly easily rekindled and accessed within each of us. And the third part of my book has to do with a lot of data and research about the benefits of growing food. And I'll go into some of that in our time together now. So the story begins not too far from here. I grew up in a suburb called Winnetka in the North Shore, a pretty affluent place. Many people would say, oh, in Winnetka they live the American dream. So there's some pictures, my sister and I at Thanksgiving, my parents, and if any of you read the book, many people have said to me, your parents are the hero of the book. I put them to the test. And then some fishing with my dad. And I was a pretty happy kid. I was a good girl, achiever. I didn't really know about who am I and what do I care about. I knew more about pleasing everybody and being successful and living out my parents' dreams for me. But I thought that was pretty fine. I did have an experience that had a huge impact on me. I spent my summers up in sort of like a nature camp in Wisconsin. And I loved my time there. It was a way to unplug from the fast pace of society, and I would come home and I'd say to my mom, why do we live the way we do? It's not right. TV and concrete and boys and all this awful stuff. It was a girls' camp. And my mom just kind of looked at me. Her big line when school would start was like, back to the salt mines. I mean, there wasn't really an option. So on we went. And we move on then. Closest to me is a picture of me, New Trier High School graduation. I graduated in 1986, so pearl necklace and all that stuff. But what happened to me, let's see, about 2/3 of the way through high school, and I was a real achiever at this point. I was the vice president of my student body, got good grades. Lots of parents would say to my parents, oh, I wish my daughter was a good girl like your girl is. And then all that started to change. Of course, it had to do with a boy and love. And the boy that I fell in love with in high school was very different than me. He was more of a bad boy, but he was a thinking bad boy. So he was reading Walt Whitman and Thoreau and Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, and he started to change the way I was thinking about things by saying to me, read this book, you gotta read this book. Let's go walk in these woods. Let's drive an hour away into this forest preserve and build a fire and sit out here all day. So it was a whole different way of thinking about life for me, and it really spun me around. So you can see the pictures. This is like a transition from 16, 17, 18, where I started to become angry, disillusioned, and I started to feel in my little affluent North Shore community like I was isolated and alone. Really, I started to reject the values that I had been raised on. And I clearly remember saying to my dad, "Why do you live, Dad? What's your life about?" And I was probably 17. And I have a sister, and my mom and I, that's our family, and my dad said to me, "I'm alive to take care of you girls and to make money to take care of you." So as a 17-year-old, that was about the most repulsive thing that my father could have said to me. Money? I just thought that was so shallow. So that was the little judgmental me at that time. I get it now, I'm in a different place. But to me, that was really kind of appalling, largely because I had started to think about the planet. And I had started to realize that we humans were destroying the earth, not taking care of it. So it was very hard for me to put together, wait a minute, all these people who love me, my community, do not realize what's going on. At the time, I harshly judged them to be, and wrongly judged them, to be superficial and only caring about money. And at the same time, I was finding out about species extinction and deforestation, and a lot of people didn't seem very happy to me when I looked around. So I was in this position as an 18-year-old of feeling like I didn't have any role models. I didn't have anybody that I could turn to that looked like they had a life I wanted, and I couldn't find anybody with whom I felt like I shared these values. Now, this was 1987, and I was living in the world of, what are those movies? John Hughes's movies. 16 Candles, Breakfast Club. So, this is not your generation. I'm 45, so I was born in 1968. But if you've seen those movies, you get it. This green movement that your campus is so infused with, and that Chicago is so, on fire about, was really not happening. So my father took me to visit probably 20 colleges all over the country. Vassar and places like that, and my poor dad, I spent the night at Colorado College, and I woke up in the morning, and my dad picked me up, and I got in my car, and he said, "So how'd you like it?" I said literally nothing until I got home and gave my parents the news. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to live on a farm and learn how to grow food.